Welcome to part 2 of our conversation with Dr. Vivian Gramley. We hope you enjoyed the first part, and now we are continuing right where we left off.
For some reason, I want to watch Bridget Jones again. I don't know where that comes from.
The Princess
I just
Bride.
like Colin Firth in that movie so much. He's just so awkward.
Okay.
Have you not watched it?
I was forced to watch it by my ex-wife, and I'm so sorry I had to see it.
I have like very bad cringing. I can't deal with stuff like this. This movie is super cringe. Like I have to physically get up and leave and come back. After doing that once or twice, like watching the movie once or twice, I got over it and I like the story.
You
But
let
I-
it go?
What?
You let it go?
Yeah.
Can't
back.
stand it. Can't stand it.
It's a guilty pleasure, definitely.
Or the other one that everyone seems to be watching around Christmas time.
Love Actually?
Why?
Oh no, that one's awful.
It's awful.
Is that the one where he's in love with his best friends?
It's just the...
Yes.
I hate that so much.
yeah,
With
yeah,
like
yeah.
bad.
With the cards at the door.
It's like you are both of you are betraying the guy you say you love. That's not good. Like why
Oh,
would-
she wasn't. She didn't do anything.
I like that Christmas movie where Bill Murray wants to staple antlers on the mouse's head. I love that one. That was a good one.
What is that? Is that called Scrooged?
Something along those lines. I love that one.
Yeah.
No.
Bill Murray.
He's good.
What a character.
I don't
Hear
know.
so many things about
Oh.
how awful he is as a human being, but he's
But-
so funny.
But in Lost in Translation, I didn't really like the movie. But then he sits there, and they're prepping him for this interview, and the Japanese woman says, it goes on and on and on and on, and then he turns to his interpreter and says, "What did she say?" And she's like, "Turn your head a little."
Yeah.
I mean, there was somewhere a tweet where Bill Murray was stealing a fry and told to a guy, "No one's going to believe you," and then he took his fries.
See, that's hysterical. I think that's
super
funny.
though.
But I mean, what a great story to have.
I ate my fries.
Imagine that you're telling someone, "Yeah, Bill Murray ate my fries." No one's gonna believe you. You didn't take a picture. I would do that. That sounds so much fun. Imagine you're like just like famous, just like, yeah, no one's gonna believe you, and just leave.
But this is this thing when we think we know these celebrities so
Right.
very well because they spend so much time in our living room. So I was on the German ICE train, and there comes Ranga Yogeshwar. We know from Quarks and Co. And he's like this popular scientist or journalist, you know.
yeah, yeah.
And so I see him walking down the aisle, and I'm like, "Hi." And he waves back, very friendly, doesn't know me. And I thought that was so nice. And I thought, we know each other so well. You've been to my place so many times. And I thought it was
But
so
he
nice.
waved back.
He did. He smiled, and I just thought, oh, you make a genuinely friendly impression. And I like that.
That's cool.
And they're just like actors where you know that they're not the same way on camera as they're off camera, and the other way around.
Yeah.
There are some where you think like if you meet them in person, they are actually nice. Like Keanu Reeves, who like is famous for being just nice to everyone, whoever meets them, when he's met by anyone wherever. But there are others where like I could imagine them not being nice if you just meet them somewhere. And then you have like these quote unquote scandals where you have like what is the talk show guy called that had like a big thing?
Kimmel, Fallon,
No, the
Colbert,
the guy that made like
It's Colbert.
Colbert.
the karaoke guy. Corden.
Oh, Jimmy
Corden
Corden.
had like
James
a big,
Corden.
like multiple things where he like behaved awfully to like staff, waiter staff, and to other people, and it's like, of course, why do you believe he's nice just because you've seen him on TV? He can be an asshole behind closed doors. Everyone can.
Oh, he
Yeah,
was
sure.
an asshole even on like on stage to Sir Patrick Stewart. Stewart? Is his
Yeah.
name?
One of the nicest
there
people
was
ever,
like
yes.
an entire
Jean-Luc
movie
Picard.
going-
It's
Yes.
Stuart.
No, it's not. Even he himself says Stewart.
Right over everybody's head. All right. Great. So
Stuart Little.
let's. Actually, I think we talked about this. I don't know if I told it. Just in the same vein, meeting celebrities. Someone was talking about running into Arnold Schwarzenegger at a coffee shop, and he made eye contact with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Schwarzenegger gave him a look like, "I know you recognize me. I know this is cool for you. Thumbs up. See ya." And like that was it. It was just I know this is cool for you. Calm down.
It's him. It's him. It's
Like,
him.
I can only imagine there are people out there for whom this is such a regular experience that they have this down to an art. Got to be amazing. Right. Welcome back, everybody, to yet another episode of Anglisten Assemble. Hey, there's already laughter. I didn't even realize I was so comedic. I don't have to do much at all. All right. And today we're going to move into a little finer discussion of PM4/Profile 2, the Histories module, which we already started a discussion about with Dr. Angela Stock, and we're going to continue our discussion here with the wonderful Dr. Vivian Gramley. How you doing today, Vivian?
I'm fine, thanks. I just had my lecture today.
Oh, did you?
Yep.
Fresh on your memory then.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So, I mean, Kate, as someone preparing for this lovely exam, the Histories exam, how are you feeling, and what kind of thoughts do you have about the history of the English language and how best to prepare?
Well, I'm not scared
Well, that's good.
because I'm coming to the lectures. I've been to different lectures with different lecturers. So yeah, and I'm doing my reading, and I'm additionally to that going to to a seminar about Middle English. Yeah, with one and only Dr. Gramley again. So I'm doing some stuff twice, which sticks better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, at the barn door.
Or to the child's face at the beach.
No, child. Yeah, Angela said that with the as if you're a child and then you play and then everything sticks on you. So yeah, doing that. Not afraid of hotel anymore, but rather more afraid of the rest because I kind of neglected it. But I think if I do the reading, do the critical questions on the use history, I should be good. And
Right.
then for the use survey, the survey of literature, it's the same. Do the reading, do the journaling, and you're good to go.
Fair enough. Leon, you had to go through the lovely ordeal that is the Histories exam. How did you feel about the whole thing, and where does history of the English language fit in your memory there of that exam?
So I did what is called a faux pas, which is I did
Just one.
multiple. I did histories before BM3 actually. I know it's not a good idea, and I regret it. But for me it turned out great. It's still not a good idea.
Define great.
I passed, and I think I passed better than I expected.
Okay.
Surprisingly, in subjects where I thought I would be worse, I was better than I expected, and the other way around, which was weird. But I realized I do like certain parts of linguistic, and which I thought it is okay if I learn it. I don't really enjoy it, but I realized, hey, this is actually cool if you know it. It is really helpful if you know where does something come from, how did this establish itself, how does this transition from this to that. And I had a study group which helped me a lot, and we went to every class, and we always sat in the front, and we always paid attention, and we had notes over Google Docs, over graphs, over timelines and everything, and we had a lot of crunch sessions, and we all passed with very good grades. And I was super scared, and I think I was mostly scared because people warned you about this evil, big, dangerous exam. And in the end, it's just you talk to lecturers for 20 minutes about stuff you are supposed to learn. And if you learned it, then it's fine. And
That all sounds like it makes sense. I mean, it is a conversation. Maybe not the conversation partners that every student would choose for themselves, but we're just talking about the stuff that we as lecturers have talked about to you, at you, with you, amongst you for hopefully 13 to 14 weeks.
you can choose the subjects, the classes. You can choose roughly the topics sometimes, and you can choose more or less the lecturers that do the exam with you. So if you don't like any of those, it's a bit on you as well.
It says more about you as a person than the lecturers or the courses, doesn't it? That's a dark way of reading it, but fair enough. Okay, let's get to the other end of the examination table. How about you, Vivian? What are some of your fond memories of the histories exam going into it? Or maybe you have a plea or a thought about,
So
how
many
students can prepare.
Where do I begin? Where do I end? One of the things I don't like when students don't know how to say the dates, and they give you the dates like their area codes.
Okay. So kind of just memorized off a piece of paper, basically.
Right, saying like William the Conqueror came in 1066. It's not an area code. It's it's like, or in 1066. I mean, no. Or if they have no clue when he came or why he came. This is so basic, I think, and I don't want to say when I say it's basic, I don't mean this in any negative way, but I think, where do we begin?
Okay.
So this is one of the things where I think, pay attention, people. You
Sure.
you hear Dr. Stock say 1066 and other years so often that how can you go wrong? And also for the American part,
Yeah.
so this is one of the things
It's the same formula for how you say a date out loud in English. So
Exactly.
if it's 1066 or 1766,
Exactly.
it's the same basic idea.
So this is so basic that I think people should know that. Students should know this. Then what gets me very often is the sometimes slightly meager grasp of English grammar students have in general. And when I teach the class, and I can't speak for Professor Schröder, who also teaches it, my emphasis, students know, is very much on grammar and phonetics, phonology, and those changes involved. And when I talk about grammatical issues, I would ask, for example, so what is the present subjunctive? This is one of the go-to questions. What is the present subjunctive? How does it work today? Who uses it? Why do we use it? And what does it look like?
Should we know it?
Everyone should know this, especially those who also took my grammar class in BM1/Basis 1. And then I ask, so we see a decline of the present subjunctive, and at the same time we see a rise of Kate. Sorry.
Help me.
Not to put you on the spot or anything.
Modal verbs, and specifically, or really should.
I was going to say, there's a reason I asked the should question.
Exactly. So, and then I say, so what do we want to express with a present subjunctive? And we lose the form, what we want to maintain the function. So what do we do instead? And how does it develop from here? What does it look like now? Can you give me an example? And can you actually explain what it looks like today? And then students like stumped. I ask about, okay, tell me about open syllable lengthening. But before you start, explain to me, please, what is a syllable in English? And what does it mean when we talk about open syllables? And then they don't know what a syllable is. They maybe know it because they clapped it in elementary school, but they can't explain it. And this is where I sometimes think, why? And this is where I'm sometimes frustrated, that there's so many things that people, I don't know where we left them, where we lost them.
Right, and I think this is possibly why definitely do BM3 Basis 3 before you approach something like the history of the English language, especially if we're going to be talking about, the development of how open syllables have possibly changed or gone through some kind of, evolution throughout the history of the language. If you can't talk about the basis of language.
But I think there's even more to it, because if you have a study group, that's what I realize is you have to explain certain things, right? Someone asks a question and you have to try to verbally explain your process of how you got there, what does it mean. But if you don't have that, you just learn from a piece of paper, you read, okay, syllable. Yeah, I know what that means. I've heard that word before, and you skip it. But if you talk to other people, they also might ask that question, because it's a super basic question, but they might ask it. And then you realize, oh wait, I know what this word means, but I can't articulate what it means. I can't explain exactly how I know what it means. I could just point out, yeah, that's one.
And I can clap it, as Vivian said.
And but if you have this interaction, then you get to this one, oh, maybe I need to know what this means so I can possibly explain it, or maybe fall back to it And even if it's just a small bonus, it might help.
But I'm sure Angela Stock said something along the lines of, when you study for the exam, verbalize, talk.
Right.
Yeah.
That it's not something, as you, Leon said, I look at it, I sort of think I know it, and that the first time you talk about these things is in the exam, chances are it's going to go south for you. So really, yeah, talk about it, talk to others about this, explain to each other how things work. And I mean, I work, as my students know, with the history of the English language. It's called the History of English, an Introduction. Steve and I were very proud to say that we published the 3rd edition just this May.
Congratulations.
Than't you very much.
Can we
It
have
was-
a yay? The yellow one?
much appreciated.
You
And,
get the drum roll too.
and what we did, of course, I put in a lot of thinking and contributed from a different angle than Steve did, simply by saying, I think my students need X, Y, and Z, keeping the students in mind. And so we added so many timelines where you see, and this is one of the things I wanted to say, a trajectory. Where did we start Old English? Where are we going? And looking at exactly this, we put into timelines and say, okay, so the negation in English developed this way. We see this and this and this and this, and this is where we're at now. And then you have to explain to me, how does this principle actually work?
Right. And I mean, maybe kind of flipping the question a little bit, like what are some of the best exams that you've received, like where you were just sitting there going, yes, this is exactly what I want to see happen in this exam? And I think you already kind of pointed at least in one direction, which was be able to, explain things, but give examples of things so that it's clear what you mean after you've, described it or defined it. But what are some of the ideas you've got of good exams?
Good exams for me are when students are able to show me that what they studied, what they learned from me, they made it their own knowledge. It's like they're telling me the story of their own family, where you don't have to think about it. Like, I imagine Angela Stock does that with the royal family, and all those kings, talking about them. Sorry, Angela. Like, this is her uncle, this is her great uncle, and that's the one once and twice removed or something. But because you don't have to think about it. This is my father and my uncle and you just know how this works.
Right.
And make this linguistic knowledge your knowledge. Talk about it like it's yours, it's your story. Because then you can talk about it freely and with confidence, and like you've understood it, which I believe you have. And when I have examinees who talk like that, I'm so utterly impressed and happy, and think some things we do accomplish, others stumble through it, introduce themselves by saying, you know what, I don't like linguistics, and linguistics is not my thing. You're not going to take the joy of linguistics away from me, but it's an unfortunate way of introducing yourself.
It really is. You're setting yourself up for failure, at least on a social level.
And in an exam as well. And if they come and they talk about it like it's their stuff, it's like, it's mind-blowing. And
Right.
it's, in a way, beautiful to watch.
Cool.
And I've had that several times.
Oh, yeah.
I think the easiest, or what I enjoyed about this exam is that you can cross-map things. And this is what I personally really enjoy. I enjoyed with analyzing papers, and I enjoyed with learning stuff, is when you have material that is, first of all, you think is not related, and then you see the connections. And you have that a lot with history of the English language, with the history of England, and with history of language. And you can see those connections where something happened, people get sick, people die, people move, and you see the change in the language. And it's the most famous thing we always talk about, Great Wall Shift.
Okay.
I know it's the most basic thing, but whenever I talk to people that don't study English and just know English from school, a lot of them complain about English and how it is read and how it is written. And finally, and this is what I started enjoying about where I started enjoying linguistics, I can I know why this is the case. If you complain, you don't want to know why, you just want to complain, but I can tell you why.
Yeah, but on this point, Leon, this idea of connecting historical facts, demography, of the country to language, you can't look at the one in isolation and ignore the other, because change happens because of contact situations. I mean, there is internal language change because the vowel system is unstable, but a lot of change is externally induced because of language contact. And so we can't look at it in isolation. And so what in this book, for example, also in the previous editions, there's always an introduction to the sociocultural development of the time. And then language is added onto this. And this is what I find makes this entire lecture so extremely fascinating. And I really burned for this stuff. I love talking about this. And I sometimes don't quite get why people might not be fascinated by this. Because it's like, now knowing why do we say phonology and not phonology? Well, it's an open syllable and we want it lengthened. There you go. There you have your explanation, for example.
Very cool. Do you have a favorite period of the English language that you be willing to share with us?
Middle English and Early Modern.
Okay, that's 2. That's cheating.
I don't know.
Well, why don't we
Between
just-
the two, I don't know.
I don't want to make you choose, but why don't we just back up and say, well, why Middle English?
Because we have the influence of French coming in. We see
Okay.
a momentous, massive restructuring of the English vocabulary. And if you look at the English vocabulary today, it's like, wow, it's so big. And I remember at high school, we had to, I don't know about you, Brian, probably too, we had vocabulary tests in English every single week.
Yep.
Because we were quizzed on it.
Yep.
And because the vocabulary is so big that you have to learn the so-called hard words, and the hard words come from French and Latin,
Yep.
mostly. So this is one of the things that I find fascinating. The other thing is the way we actually see how language standardization puts on speed, basically, and it's propels forward. But also grammatical changes, phonological changes. We see in the end of the Middle English period, the Great Vowel Shift starting, and then in the Early Modern period it goes on. But we have so many changes in the language because of demographic changes that we see people moving to, say, London, and we can observe dialect leveling. We see how English was not written for at least 150 years, and then when it pops up in writing again, we see how language had changed. And spoken language always changes faster than written language, obviously. So that's why I find this a very, very interesting period. And while my students, most of them native speakers of German, understand more Old English than American students would, because they speak German, and they would recognize more, and they understand more of the entire idea of having different case markings and grammatical gender. It's quite the advantage. I also find it so fun that we lose all that. And as I said, the story of English is very much a story of loss, but also of coming up with new things, finding solutions to loss.
Innovation as a result of loss. Yeah, for sure. That makes a lot of sense. So what did the Dane take away from us? Or how did the Danes change what we're saying? And how did the French, the Norman French and the Central French and all that good stuff? Okay, I'm going to go off the rails a little bit here and ask, where do you think English is going? I mean, this is, for someone who studies all of these different periods of English and talks about them on a regular basis, I mean, where is English going these days, do you think?
I think it's very, very difficult to answer. I think we're already observing more leveling as we're moving. So we're losing certain structures that who also teaches grammar, with a lot of enthusiasm. I see, and I don't look at my student cohort, but I really look at native speakers, say, in the States.
Sure.
I see fewer and fewer people using counterfactual conditions with a real counterfactual structure. Like, if I had known, I would have done this. And the way they do it, I mean, the structure in German is the same, but it's not done that way by many speakers anymore. And I find this is maybe something's inevitable, but also something that I would probably eventually miss
Sure.
this finer distinction. So I think there are going to still be plenty of people who are sticklers for rules without being completely prescriptive.
Okay.
But I think we always need a yardstick against which we can measure and say, because when I ask my students, say, do you want to sound more like German speaking English or like English native speakers? Say, I want to go for the English native speaker. But they need a role model. And what is
Sure.
my role model? And I can accept more and more non-standard varieties, but I need something against which I can measure this and say, where do we, and that doesn't mean that I say we can't accept this and this and this and this and this and this, but we also want to see what else is out there. What is maybe what does the book say? But you can do it differently. So I wouldn't say that English is on a slippery slope downhill by no means, but I think it's more susceptible and open to more variance.
Okay. I think that's already, I mean, a keen observation of where world English and English as are. So do you, I mean, you even listening to the language you used to answer that question, you said something along the lines of there are fewer and fewer people, ... And I often think to myself, yeah, there are fewer and fewer people that use the word fewer as opposed to less.
I know.
And it bothers the shit out of me.
Same here.
Like, I try to be very descriptive in my approach to linguistics, but I hear certain things like object pronouns being used in the subject position just because it happens to be with another person. So, or the vice versa. I mean, it's people use the hypercorrection of like subject position pronouns
I
for
know.
objects. It drives me nuts.
Yeah, ditto. I think there's two ways we can also look at language. When native speakers of German, and when I tell them that in my classroom, I say, look, all the things that you do when you speak German, the structures you come up with, the quote-unquote errors you make, or the rules you violate, and you're okay with it, and you would never say anything. But if you had a foreigner use them, you'd go like, oh, their German is no good. And now flip the coin and say, okay, as native speakers of English, we can do so much more with the language. We're allowed, I believe, to do things that non-native speakers learners can't do yet.
Right.
But getting there. Because first, I want to know that you basically know the rules that are out there. And then once you know them, go violate them.
So you have to get the driver's license first before you can run the stop sign.
Absolutely.
Okay.
At least you have to know you got to stop, and then you run the light, it's fine. You know, like that. I really think there is a little bit of a difference here. And then, of course, we have the difference between spoken and written language very much. We see this in German, we see this in English. And I would always mark an intensifier way in academic language, like, is this way better, way more? I'd say, no, not. Or get in academic writing, no, please don't use get. It's not a good word for academia.
Sure.
I just love that the point got addressed, that if you go to a native English-speaking country and they say something in a way where you learned this is incorrect, you can't correct them. They know it better than you. It would be weird.
Oh, they don't.
Or they
don't necessarily.
No.
But like I had it with my family where I met them and they were just speaking whatever, and I was like, okay, I get what you're saying, but I have learned this differently, and they might know that the way they're saying it would be not standard, but they don't care.
Right.
No.
I think that's the bigger issue. They just don't care. That's just how we say it. We're identifying ourselves with our language choices here as people from this area, or even just as a member of this family. This is how we talk about certain things. And I feel like we do that all the time in language without talking about how it varies from grammatical rules.
And I say in the classroom, if I were you, and I know that in TV series out there you hear if I was you. Out there, do what you want.
Right.
In education, academia, you don't. And the thing is, when I meet students in town and I speak English to them, obviously, I don't correct their English. In my classroom, I do. And I think it's a big difference.
Sure.
And in my classroom, my students know I don't want foul language. I just don't want it. Outside, I don't care. It's not my classroom. You know, it's like that. And comma rules, for example, in English, they seem to my students as being random, arbitrary, weird at best, and they're so rule-governed. They're just not the German comma rules.
Right.
But don't think that native speakers necessarily know where to place a comma. No, they don't. This is the thing. It's just like we are here in an academic setting, and we tell you how it's supposed to be done to then be maybe ignored later. But once you are at school as students, later as teachers, and then you also want to tell them this is the way native speakers do it. And Brian, when you teach, you also probably say, I really don't know why we do this, but we do it this way, or this doesn't sound idiomatic, and explain why we say, I just did this, and the British say, I have just done it. The just as a signal word for present perfect, but not for us.
Right.
It's just the way it is.
It's a choice. I mean, and I think that's it. We weren't a part of the decision-making process, but it was certainly a choice somewhere down the line, and that's just how these two separate geographic regions decided to handle this particular word. That's for sure. You're shaking your head at me, Leah.
No, I agree. I think there's a difference between ignoring something and being oblivious to something. You can only ignore something you know, but if you're oblivious to something, you don't know better.
That's a good point.
I may even take issue with the superlative there. You don't know better. Well, you just don't know. I don't even know if it's better. It's just a choice,
just
again,
don't know,
that somebody made at some point. And, I mean, our job is to teach these rules or at least to make people aware of them.
To be fair, in German schools, when they teach English, they also, it's not necessarily correct what they teach.
Oh, no, that's not. My son had a teacher. And my son has big vocabulary, and he used some words that the teacher didn't know. They were regular good words, I would say. And the teacher said, I don't know those words, so they don't exist.
Oi.
Yep, oi.
Yeah.
Problematic.
Well,
Very.
I've always held that a teacher or a school is only as good as its teacher, or a class is only as good as the person inside it. And you do get some bad hombres out there every now and again.
It's also very, very strict and very. It's very set. So if you bring something and you say this is a new word or new interpretation or new edition, there is a chance that the teacher says, "Yeah, but we didn't talk about this, so leave this out." It can be an interpretation of a piece of literature. It can also be a word that you read and you want to include this, and they say no, because no one else knows this, so you're not supposed to use this.
Okay.
Which is how does that make sense?
Stifle your own intelligence and curiosity for a second so that you can learn everybody else's stuff.
You can bring an interpretation of a literary piece of a book to an English or German class, and they tell you, yeah, we didn't talk about this interpretation. We don't use this.
Right.
So if you write a paper, don't include this.
Okay.
Include the 3-4 ones we talked about.
Right.
Terrible.
Yeah. Kate, you were telling me a story about something that you did with your English teacher, or there was some kind of...
Yeah.
It was a word, right?
I can't remember. Can you piece it together for me again?
Sure. Shout out to Mr. No, he was a referendar at our school, and as far as the rumors go, he was on the verge of failing. That's why he came to the university. I'm gonna cut out his name, don't worry. And he was on the verge of failing, and he came to University of Bielefeld. He was an English teacher and something else, I don't know, his combo. And he was, as far as we understood, he was a native speaker. And his English was good, but he was slightly dyslexic, I'd say. Yeah, every time he would write stuff on the board, it would be, the letters would be, in different places, all over the place sometimes. But he was a nice person. He was trying hard, and he was doing his best. He was put in our advanced English course because we were the most well-behaved ones, and he did his exam with us. He passed. I don't know where he's teaching now, but we had a conversation with him, and I wanted to use the word cobbler as Schuster. And then he went on to discuss with me that it's not the word for the Schuster, but rather the shoemaker. And I was like, man, I've watched a movie yesterday, and the name of the movie was Cobbler. You can check it. And he was actually repairing the shoes. So he turned his back, opened the Oxford Dictionary, found a word, put the book down, looked at me, and then he needed a second, I guess, to tell me that I was right. And me, of course, being a little B word, I celebrated it very much. But yeah, he was nice.
Well, I think
Me
this is actually
wasn't.
a good example of, I mean, if you're willing to admit you've made a mistake in a classroom, I think that's already a sign of intelligence and
Yes,
a
but
certain personality.
at the same time, I'm snarky and I'm pushy in a way that I was trying. Yeah. And I was trying to prove my point.
Yeah.
I was trying to tell them that I was right. Maybe other students would go and say like, yeah, okay, whatever. But me, no. I was right. I knew I was right. I even checked myself again to make sure that I was right. And then, yeah. That's that. I wouldn't want myself in classroom. Like, I wouldn't want to teach myself.
Sure.
Yeah, never, ever.
Well, I think it's all about how you present yourself. If you introduce yourself as, I don't know every single word in English. I don't speak perfect English. No one does. Everyone speaks in their own way. Even native speakers have their dialects and accents and everything. Pidgins, creoles. We just learn together. And if you find a word that I have not used or that we didn't talk about, introduce it. Maybe we can all learn something. But if you set yourself as the rule, everything I do is always correct and perfect, and if you take one step off this line, you're done, then people will try to find anything that you've said that might be incorrect and try to correct you because you have presented yourself as infallible.
I guess the biggest problem or the challenge for young teachers is actually to establish a certain dominance, a certain hierarchy, especially if it's with older students. If they are 16, 17, they're trying to, move certain, can I say borders? Like, in a way.
Sure.
Yeah, in a way that they're trying to establish, certain boundaries. And me, I was testing all the new teachers. Of course, I would test them. And I even had a German teacher back in my home country, back where I came from. And at that point, I would already speak German, so I was fluent in German. And of course, I was correcting her grammar. Of course, I would be picking on her. So, yeah, no.
Did you have experiences with students that tried something like this? That tried, like, to correct you or to point something out, or like went to you afterwards like, I think what you said was incorrect. Was there something like that at some point, or is it more like a school thing?
Oh, I've got some, but Vivian, have you got any experiences like this?
No.
Honestly, I'd be scared too. Not because you are scary, but
I'm not.
No, you're not. But because it's a certain dominance that comes from you.
I'm more than happy to discuss things, preferably in class, so everyone can participate or at least listen in that sense. But I was talking about how Otto Jespersen, a Danish linguist, says that borrowing.
The cycle.
Yeah, the cycle, but not Jespersen's cycle about negation at this point, but how borrowing is undemocratic, because it's only reaches certain people with a certain level of education. And then we were talking about this, and then the students started like, but why undemocratic? Is that why do we call it this, and why do we call it that or that? And I said, that's actually a very good point that you're making. I called it undemocratic because that's what he said. But it's a fair point to argue that maybe today you wouldn't call it that anymore, because if you wanted to, you could use your phone or any digital device to look up the meaning of the word, as long as you know how to spell it. But even then, Siri might help you, and you say, what does this mean? And you just repeat the word. So from that point of view, it's maybe not as much undemocratic anymore as it used to be. But I still think certain stylistic devices, a certain range of vocabulary comes with a degree of education.
Sure.
Or maybe an internal interest and motivation also on top of that. I don't want to limit it to just, you come from this kind of background or have this kind of education.
No.
It's not true. It's definitely not true. But then I'm very, very willing to discuss that, and I'm open for this. But if I tell you how negation particles were lost and how we have the negative first principle in English now, I don't think there's very much room to discuss that. And from that point of view, because I'm presenting facts, and of course facts that we see based on what we find in writing. We can then discuss other things and talk about the role of women in the development of the English language and the change of the English language, and say, okay, what was their role actually? Because we always talk about men. And I'm open to all of this, but because I teach so many rather factual things, and I think, Brian, this might be the same with you. You can sort of say, okay, but this is what the Civil War was about. And
Sure.
people argue or discuss and present different takes on this. And some say, oh, no, it's more this. And others say it's more that. And you say, well, we have those 2, 3, 4 sides, however, to that, first half, second half, third half kind of thing.
Yeah.
That we're open to this, but actually going up to you and saying, you're absolutely wrong about this. No, I don't think I've ever had that.
I mean, in those kinds of situations, I think you could say there are disagreements and we can debate about whatever that particular point might be. It's slavery, by the way. It's simply slavery. Anyway, that's
I love
the cause
that you
of...
mentioned the Civil War. In America, there's a group of people that says it's not about slavery at all.
Yeah, but I mean, people do talk about other
A
things.
state's right to what?
Yeah.
Slavery. It's still slavery, folks. Okay. But no, I mean, I've had situations where students have corrected me just kind of offhand, like if I say the 100 Years' War as opposed to the 30 Years' War when I'm speaking out of school. That's stuff that happens all the time, and people can correct me directly to my face, and that's fine.
But this is like a
I'm
slip
always
of the tongue,
appreciative.
basically.
Yeah, sure, exactly.
I have that, too.
But yeah, I can't remember anybody who's ever, totally stepped out of line as a reason to challenge me as a result of a mistake or even a perceived mistake in class.
I feel like to challenge here, you need to know at least the same amount as your teacher. And this is where it gets harder, because on a language, if you're learning a language in school, for example, in school, then it's a different thing, because those are small things, smaller scale. That's why there is not much challenge, and then
Sure.
everyone is adult already. Like, I wouldn't go and say
Already.
By age,
But
Yeah.
I think it's very much always a matter of how you do it. Because
Right.
it's one thing to say, hey, teacher, you got this one wrong, and this is not the participle, and this, and make them look like fools or embarrass them. That never goes down well, and chances are you're going to pay for that later, depending on the teacher.
I've seen people who tried.
They tried and failed. They tried and died.
I've seen people especially on social topics, where it's like, where they say, I don't think this is the case. And then the best thing you can ask, like, why? Have you any proof? Have you any context? And that is usually where it fails, or where they bring something that is in comparison, it doesn't make any sense. You have one website versus 15 books or something. I have read this on this one article on this one site written by this one blogger or something.
Sure.
Like, I have this, it can be like gender wage gap or feminism or something, British politics or American politics or this and that, and people have opinions on these things, and it's all about how you try to approach this. If you say, I think you're wrong and I'm right, then it's confrontational. But you can ask, is this factual? Is this an opinion? I have read this. Is this maybe also right? Can I bring this in? It is all about how you approach it. But if you make it a confrontation, not a conversation, then there will be sadly one winner, because that's how a confrontation usually works.
Or both losers. I feel like that happens
in this
too.
instance, it would be both losers. Yeah.
But I mean, there's always this great psychological phrase, like if you do psychotherapy, and the phrase is, I wonder. And if you start a conversation with, I wonder, Why does this person say it in this way, but you're telling me this? Like, if you already start with this, I wonder, you're already starting with an open mind. Like, I'm curious about this. And you could be even completely in conflict with what was said, but it's done in a different way.
You can also, but this I wonder can also be said in a very demeaning way, or in a very how do I say that? Like I've heard like Tucker Carlson say it, and he doesn't mean it in a good way. It's like, I wonder if the Democrats do this, and then this would be very good, and this would be very bad. Like, it doesn't really. It depends how you say it, how you use it, right?
For sure.
Like it's still fine.
I'm looking for the rails right now. Hang on.
I feel like it's still fine as long as you don't say, I wonder, why are you so dumb?
Why would you only talk about the one side and not the other side, right? Every opinion has two sides, correct? Like,
At
some
least.
things are facts, right?
And that's what I try to tell my students in my writing and research class. We talked about argument and how does argument actually work.
Yeah.
And I had this nice situation about starlings being, nesting in the rafters of a family's attic, and the vent, the screen was broken, and they nested there. And then the young ones, were loud, and the parents would come into fly in, and their wings would hit the rafters, and the family lost all morning sleep. And then was the idea is like, okay, so what did they do? They nailed it shut, and the fledglings died, and the parents were, orphaned parents. And is this a question, or is this a case of animal cruelty? And then I put I said, okay, now you decide for yourself. And then you pretend like you're sitting at a family table, with your parents, grandparents, sisters, whatever you have there. And then think about, what would your mother say? Let's do this about the starlings. What would your father say? Your brother, your uncle, your aunt? And really think, what would they say? Maybe your little brother wants to take a BB gun to the birds. But, and and so on. And then I said, okay, now meet and come together in small groups, 3 or 4 people, and bring to the table what your family members, and you think about this, and have an open mind and see what do others think. And then you realize there's more to just nailing the vent shut or taking a BB gun. And really thinking about this, looking at something from more sides than just your one narrow mind in that in that way.
Right.
And they were very surprised at possible solutions that were out there. Getting someone to relocate the nest, or just getting earplugs and just changing yourself rather than doing something to or about the birds like that. And this is what I think people have to learn: keep an open mind and be willing to accept other views. And argument is not necessarily about shouting someone down and about winning. It's about finding maybe middle ground, compromise, or maybe say, okay, I accept that you have a different position here. I'm still gonna go and nail that shut. I mean, Vivian, would never do that.
Sure.
I would, oh no. But, if someone did that, now I could at least say, okay, I showed you different perspectives and other options that are out there. And if you still want to do that, that's on you now. And I can somehow live with that. And I think they found this quite helpful also as an exercise to look at, the summary writing they have to do for their essay. Say, okay, so how do I look at this? Look at more sides. So you keep an open mind. What is there?
I think arguing definitely is something that you have to learn. And I think a lot of students don't, or don't really exchange their opinions with others, and they are immediately hurt if there's a different opinion. And I think meeting someone with a different opinion is good, because your opinion can only evolve if it gets challenged, if there's something more put to it. If you only have people that have the same opinion and know the same things, there's nothing to evolve. There's nothing going to change. It's just going to stay the same. You had a class, or in your history class, we were supposed to argue for and against leaving Britain.
Right.
As the American.
Yeah, loyalists versus patriots
Yes.
versus neutrals. I remember this. Sure.
Yeah, and the con leaving, or the staying group, brought so many good arguments that in the end they won. So in our version, we stayed as part of America.
Yeah.
And that was very interesting, because there was one group that was supposed to just listen to the arguments, forget where this could lead, and only listen to what arguments are brought to the table. And in the end, the let's stay group
And
brought
the
by the Royalists.
Royalists won, so
Yeah.
that town got wiped out in the American Revolutionary War. Sorry about all the death guys.
I think it was about like all of America. Just like, do we stay as America?
No, this was just colonial Williamsburg.
Yeah, sure,
it was
sure.
one. It was one
Okay,
space.
okay.
But
So-
it's this idea of thinking of argument not as a winning or losing situation, not as a shouting match. It's not a debate club where you debate the others into I don't know, oblivion or something. But
Right.
it's really about seeing the other person and seeing other sides, and to any argument, any position that's out there.
Right.
And then maybe you can convince, but maybe not. But you don't necessarily have to set out to convince, but simply to see
No.
what else is out there. And I find this is very, very important, whether this is
Yeah.
historical, social, or in other areas.
And I feel like this is something that I try to do in the argumentation and critical reading classes. That's really trying to not convince the other person of your rightness or that you are the right party here. You should convince other people of the validity of your perspective.
Absolutely.
And that's all you really have to do. As long as they understand that your perspective is valid, you've won. Like, that's all. You're not going to change people's minds. They have to change their own minds.
It's really, however much I dislike this expression, you make sure that the other person feels seen and heard. I find this sort of psycho talk, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, everyone wants to be seen and heard with their positions, with their arguments, and their reasons for doing things they do the way they do them. But if I'm convinced, and Kate knows this from other conversations with that, about a lot of things, and you say, in many ways, I am very German because I'm very scheduled.
Yeah.
Since I do the same thing every Saturday. German, organized, just set in my ways. And I mean, for what it's worth, whether you like it or not, that doesn't really bother me as a person, but you see me and it's okay like that. And I mean, you can't change it anyway because I'm set in my ways. Not to an unmovable point by no means, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
All right. And maybe just to set this back on the hotel rails for a moment. Like if we're talking about feeling seen, feeling heard, I think specifically as examiners, we like to know that we have been seen and heard from our lectures by being able to get some answers to the questions that we ask during the exam. And students, prepare to be seen and heard. No.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't expect perfection.
No.
I don't expect the perfect answer, but I expect that they show me that they understood certain principles, that they can draw this trajectory of this is what we had, this is how it changed, and this is what we get today. It's really about this function versus form idea for the language part.
Sure.
And I think it's so doable. And unlike the other examiners in the other areas, I don't give my students questions, topics to choose from. I do say my focus is less on Old English than on the rest. But I don't ignore Old English by no means.
Right.
But if they listen to my lecture, they know also what I like and what I like to talk about.
There you have it. Right. Well, I feel like, Vivian, you have been very generous with your time here. And so I'd like to say thank you yet again for hanging out with us and talking all about hotel and God and the world.
It was fun. It was
That
fun.
was fun. I agree.
It was.
And Leon, as always, a privilege. And Kate, as always, a pleasure.
Wait.
What are we waiting for? Go.
Plug something.
Vivian, do you have a last piece of advice for all those taking PM4?
Oh, this taking too long already.
Fine.
Study with others.
Yeah.
Visualize it. Take whatever means that, you don't have to scrapbook like one of our students did, which
Oh,
was
yeah.
like, oh
Yeah.
my
That was
goodness.
beautiful.
Wow.
I mean, Ryan, I've never seen anything quite like it. I mean, never.
Okay.
It's like museum work, basically. Yeah. It was amazing. But study with others. This is my probably biggest piece of advice. Don't study on your own. Make sure you go to the lectures as regularly as possible, which is basically, null and void today. We have one more week of classes, but for the next
Yeah.
semesters.
Sure. Absolutely.
And stay on top. Don't just, start cramming two weeks before the exam. It's not going to work.
It's too much to cram, I think. All right.
Do BM3 first.
Do BM3 first.
Please, yes.
That makes sense as well. All right, folks. Then, all of you folks out there in La La Land, thank you also for your attention. I hope you also feel seen and heard. I mean, I can't see or hear you right now, but hey.
You can always write comments on
Absolutely.
Instagram.
Give us some Insta comments or write us an email. We're out there. We're available. At any rate, Excelsior, and see you next time on Anglisten Assemble.
Give you a try. If you do well, you can go a long way. But if you fail,
The producers pledge that they will produce
you
only
can go a long way
videos
too.
which will contribute to your musical enjoyment and successfully meet your high-quality standards.
This episode of Anglisten Assemble was privately produced as a joint non-profit informational project of students and staff at the beautiful Bielefeld University. All views and opinions expressed on the show in no way reflect the official views of the university and are solely the perspectives of our hosts and guests. Information provided is true to the best of our knowledge at the time of production, but this is naturally subject to change as some details are time sensitive. Anglisten Assemble is produced and edited by Kate Lee, Leon Dalashel, and Brian Rosema for the private use of our quality audience. If you want to get updates and further info about Anglisten Assemble, check out our Insta at anglisten.assemble. And if you're enjoying what you hear, throw us a 5-star review on Spotify. Those help us spread the word and get more Anglisten to join the assembly. Musical accompaniment today includes the sonic stylings of music from allesgamerfrei.de. And finally, we'd like to thank our special guest today, the venerably vibrant Vivian Gramley.